welcome, first of all. Great to have you here for a little info session on the Circular by Design Masters, which is obviously kicking off in September, and really excited to hear of your interest. So we don't have a huge amount of time together. What I wanted to cover was, we'll do a quick round of introductions. I'm going to speak a little bit about the urgency for change. So, why this master's now? What is it really trying to add, let's say, to the space? Why is it needed when we look at the textiles and the fashion industry at the moment? Of course, a walkthrough of the actual program, what you can expect in terms of, the focus of the masters, kind of the key design principles, and the breakdown of the modules, and the work that you'd actually be undertaking. Application requirements, that's the practical side of things, which Bernie might speak to. So what does it mean to apply, deadlines, forms, all the rest. And then a little look at kind of the career opportunities that we see developing in this space. Of course, it's really a very emergent space, so this is constantly changing. But if we take a little snapshot of kind of the main career routes that you'd be potentially eligible for after completing an education like this, and then time for Q&A at the end, which is really important. As I go through today, if questions are coming to mind, just feel free to drop them in the chat, and then I can refer back to them at the end of the session. The day is being recorded, and we'll share that afterwards in case you want to watch it back. And just so that we get a sense of kind of who's in the room, even if you don't feel comfortable to turn on your cameras, maybe you can go into the chat and just quickly introduce yourself. That would be great. Give us kind of your name, if you are associated with an organization, because we have a lot of people interested who are coming from within the industry, then you're free to mention that, and where you're joining from today, and then what you hope to get out of today's session. So maybe you just take a minute or two to write into the chat and give us a sense of who you are. That would be wonderful. And while you do that, I'll briefly introduce myself. So lovely to meet you. My name is Gwen Cunningham, and I'm the lead for sustainability and circularity at NCAD. I actually went to NCAD way back when. I studied here myself, fashion and textiles back in the day. And it was really, I suppose, a very formative experience, a wonderful experience in many ways, but also one that left me with many, many questions about the true impact and nature of the industry, and my role within it. So it was actually the day that I graduated that I moved to the Netherlands, and moved there because I knew that they were at the forefront of sustainability and circularity in particular, and spent almost a decade over in the Netherlands working within the fashion industry, trying to, I suppose, change it from within. I could see that this was an industry that was riddled with a lot of issues, social and environmental. And I suppose, I was having those existential questions, maybe some of you can relate, whether to change careers, or whether to really stick with it and try to be a change maker within the fashion and textiles industry. So that's what I did. And it's such a joy now to have the opportunity to come back and to shape an educational program that really gives space to this topic, and I suppose gives learners the opportunity to look at these questions critically within the context of the masters, understand all of the issues in all of their complexity, and then also develop real life solutions to those problems through their own practice. It's the kind of masters that I wish I had had the opportunity to kind of engage with when I was going through college. So that's a little bit about me, but I want to set the scene more kind of for the context around the program. So let's start with the question of the urgency for change. So why do we need a master's on circular design within the fashion and the textiles industry? Well, probably if you're on this call to a certain degree, that we have, of course, one of the most creative and lucrative and consumer-facing industries in the world, but we also have one of the most wasteful and one of the most pollutive. And the textiles and fashion industry operates in almost an entirely linear way. And by that, I mean that we take resources, we make products, sell those products, use them for a short amount of time, and ultimately the majority end up as waste, being landfilled or incinerated. And that's not only, distinct or unique to our industry, but this is really the way that we've designed the world at large to work. This is a fantastic graphic which shows kind of the linear nature of our entire global economy. And this is a piece of work that an organization, Circular Economy in the Netherlands, conducts every year, looking at, let's say, the kind of metabolism of our global economy. So you see on the left the resources we're extracting, whether it's minerals or ores or fossil fuels, how those materials are being processed to produce and provide, services or products that we need in society. So things like housing, communications, mobility, healthcare, etc. And then that small grey line at the bottom that's circling around, that's how much of those materials are actually being captured at end of use and reintegrated back into the supply chain as a secondary material, so being recycled back into the system. And that very small little grey line, as you can see from this graphic, is only a fraction of like the total volume that we are extracting and consuming. And when you crunch the numbers, it shows that actually it's only 7.2%. So you could say that we are 7.2% circular as a world at the moment. And, fashion textiles, we don't have the statistic yet on how circular the fashion textiles industry is, but I would say we're one of the biggest contributors. We're one of the, let's say, the worrisome sectors, because of course we are, taking huge volumes of largely finite resources to produce materials, whether that's a synthetic or a cotton or a natural material. And we know that the reliance on virgin feedstock is huge. 97% of all material input fiber going into the industry is from virgin materials. So that's not recycled, but virgin feedstock. And then we're making over 100 billion tons of clothing every year. We have around about 11 billion people on the planet, but 100 billion tons of clothing. We're using that clothing for increasingly short amount of time. So we know that, globally, we use our clothes less and less. And then around 70 to 85% of all textiles is landfilled or incinerated after use. So the situation is quite dire, and it's also, as you can imagine, incredibly complex and very global in nature. And we're in this kind of hyper acceleration mode, I always say, because of course the pace of the industry has been rapidly changing the last few years. And we're also, our consumer habits are becoming more and more troublesome. So we know that, for instance, consumption is going through the roof. Meanwhile, utilization, how long we wear our clothes, is taking a nosedive. And these two things combined create quite a picture. So what is the role of design? Well, I always say that it always starts with design. And, you may have seen this before. It's estimated that 80% of all product-related environmental impacts are determined during the design phase of a product. And when I was a designer and I came across the statistic, I thought, wow, this is a huge call to action. It's kind of terrifying. It means that there's a lot of responsibility on my shoulders. Every decision I make around the design table is locking in a particular impact. So it is a lot of responsibility, but it's also a huge opportunity and privilege. And if you make the right decisions, you can really steer the ship in a different direction. And I think we often think of design in terms of, designing a product. But of course, as designers, we can infiltrate and influence the system far beyond just designing products differently. So when we look at a circular system, which is, let's say, the kind of vision that we're working towards, what does that mean? It means building a system where materials are kept in continual circulation, where we are regenerating the natural systems that have been degenerated over so long, and we're really extending the life of all of the materials and products that we do develop. So it's essentially based on principles of repair and reuse, resale, remanufacture, and recycling. And in order to achieve a system like that, which looks simple here but is incredibly difficult in practice, we need to redesign materials, of course. We need to start looking at the, let's say, the bare bones components that we use to make a product. So how do we make things that are safe, recycled, or renewable? Those would be kind of key circular principles when it comes to material design. We need to redesign the actual products. So how do we create items, clothing items, that could be footwear, accessories. Of course, textiles and fashion is quite a wide sector in that sense, whereby we're designing with minimal waste, designing products that actually last, so they're incredibly durable, and designing products so that they can be made to be made again. And what I mean by that is that they are repairable, reusable, recyclable from the outset, that we're already building in those capabilities at the design stage. And then redesigning systems. And this is the one that people tend to forget about, but really we need to not only design the material and the product, but we also need to design the actual business model and the system to ensure that those materials and products do in fact get kept for longer, do in fact get repaired, do in fact get recycled. And more we see designers playing an active role in, for instance, supply chain management, supply chain design, and technology design, all of these enabling factors that ensure that we're developing a circular system and not just a singular circular product. So this has been a really emerging and rapidly moving space the last 10 years. I would say the last 5 years, it's really ramped up. And we're seeing that the change is being driven on multiple fronts. On one hand, you've got really strong signals in terms of regulation. So we have a new EU textile strategy that was launched in 2023, and that sets out a really ambitious vision for how the textiles industry within the EU needs to change, so that all products placed on the EU market are durable, repairable, recyclable, made from recycled fibers, free of hazardous substances, etc. But it also starts to set out very clear parameters in terms of, that we need to move away from fast fashion, that we need to have systems to collect and sort textiles at end of use, etc., etc. So there's huge regulatory changes coming down the line, the tracks, that brands especially are looking at and trying to prepare for. And one of the big things that the brands will be impacted by is extended producer responsibility. We won't go into huge amount of detail, but it's essentially that they, as people who put product on the market, will be responsible for managing that product post-use. So it's no longer going to be good enough to just sell product and then forget about it, but actually, as a brand, as a retailer, you will have accountability and responsibility to ensure that the product is having a responsible end of use phase. So this is going to really shift the conversation, as you can imagine. And brands and designers and retailers are moving very quickly to kind of step in line with all of these changes. One of the big things that we see them doing is developing and rolling out their own circular design guidelines, programs, pilots, principles, trying to re-educate their own internal teams, and trying to essentially change the kind of nature of their entire product portfolio to be circular from the outset. So this is very much a kind of re-education that's happening within the industry, that maybe you've seen or heard of through the cases and also the products that we're seeing on the market at the moment. And then we've got a lot of other activity in the space, either from research bodies or trade associations, academic institutes, a lot of really exciting work happening to make this shift from linear to circular possible. So there's great kind of best practice and learnings out there as well in terms of various initiatives and pilots and projects that are ongoing in this space. So all of that kind of said and done, hopefully that sets a little bit of the context, the backdrop against which we feel that a program purely focused on circular design within the fashion and textile space is really critically needed at the moment. And we saw this need back in 2022. And the first thing we did within NCAD was to develop a pilot program, the Circular by Design pilot, which we launched in 2022 with a handful of Irish companies. So we made a selection, we did a kind of national call for applications, and we made a selection of a handful of companies that went through a program over the course of roughly kind of 6 months, whereby they were getting trained up in the principles of circular design, circular materials, circular business models, and then using all the knowledge and the skills that they were gaining to kind of take a critical look at their own business model and make changes to what they were doing and to their practice. And just to give you a sense of kind of some of the activities that we built into this program, because it might give you a flavor for the type of things that you can expect on the masters as well. There was a lot of active learning and experiential learning. So for instance, one of the first things we did was go to a waste facility and have the brands and the designers experience firsthand what the end of use value chain looks like. Where do our clothes go when we say goodbye to them? How much is reused versus incinerated versus recycled? Why is that? How did the design decisions that you make as a designer, impact on kind of the journey or the path that an individual product can take at the end of use stage? So that was an example of one of the field trips that we took. Then in the first masterclass, they were really learning about the kind of key principles of circularity, what we call the key elements of a circular system, and taking that model and using it as a framework to assess their own practice. From there, we led them through a process of rethinking their own practice. So we went through a series of kind of brainstorming activities in a collaborative kind of workshop setting to start to identify, okay, here are the places within what I'm doing where there's actually opportunity to do better and to make a move towards a more circular way of producing, for instance. And then the final step, the process, of course, is to take those great ideas and concepts and actually move them into a plan of action. So that was the Implement Masterclass, where they were developing customer personas, they were developing business model canvases, and they were starting to identify what they wanted to pilot over the summer, etc. And we had various different experts joining, national experts, but more importantly also international voices, whether those are individual kind of academics, researchers, or for instance, innovators, brands coming in to speak about their work in this space and give inspiration and tips and guidance to the class. And the final outcome of this quite condensed pilot was very real examples from each of the brands of change. So all of the brands developed new circular products that they brought to the market. And these were then showcased through an exhibition and an innovation festival in November of 2022. So if you're curious to learn more about that pilot and the outcomes and the impact of the pilot, you can find it all on the Circular by Design website. But hopefully it gives you a little bit of a sense of kind of the way the experience of that pilot, I suppose, has really shaped the way that we have designed this master's. And so a lot of the same principles and approaches will apply in terms of experiential learning, collaborative learning processes, a real integration with industry, and kind of live project work, a combination of theory and practice, etc., etc. So a lot of that is pulled through into the masters. So I'm going to take just a moment to talk about the masters then, and I'll start with the practicalities. So it is a level 9 masters. The duration as you see, is 2 years part-time. So kicking off September of this year, this is the inaugural year, and running until June 2026. We deliberately designed this to be a very kind of intimate and close group. So there's 15 places on the masters, and that's really to ensure that we have adequate kind of contact time and one-on-one time with everyone. The format is hybrid, also very much a deliberate decision to try and ensure that we cater to those who are, yeah, who are not in Dublin, essentially, and also who may have other commitments on their time. So we will have online and offline lectures, seminars, masterclasses, workshops, etc., tutorials, group presentations. And the way that that is going to be structured is that learners will be expected to be on the NCIT campus for an in-person delivery once every 3 weeks. And we will specify which day that falls on. So every 3 weeks you'll be on campus, and the rest of the delivery will be entirely online. In terms of time commitment, it's part-time. So we say it's 20 hours a week, and you would expect that about 7 to 8 of those hours would be contact time with lecturers, experts, guest speakers, etc. And the rest of that time would be individual self-led work or study. The fees, which you would have seen online, £4,500 per year, and an application fee, a small application fee of 55, which doesn't apply to current students within NCAD. And the application deadline is, relatively flexible, but what I would say is the spaces are filling up really fast. So if I were you and you're interested and keen, I would be looking to get my application in the next month at the very minimum to secure a place, because we are really offering on a rolling basis, so that those 15 places are filling up very quickly. Who is it for? So we see two main kind of profiles for this master's. The first is recent textile or fashion graduates who are looking to specialize their professional career and their practice around sustainability to develop a strong personal portfolio of sustainable work and to generate a network in this space. So if I think back, this is me way back when, leaving, let's say, with a more kind of general education in textiles and fashion, and wanting to specialize my practice and my career in the sustainability direction. So we call this the future industry professional. The second profile that we imagine is current industry professionals. So this could be textile and apparel designers, buyers, brands, or manufacturers who are looking to upskill and to reorientate their career in this direction, to understand kind of the latest trends and innovations, regulation, as I said, certification, so to really build up their capacity, because they see that this is an emerging need within their existing company. And of course, to build a like-minded community of peers. We see that oftentimes, if you are really an advocate and a change maker out there in the industry already, it can feel like quite a lonely task. So to build that community of practice around you. And these are two quite textile and fashion orientated profiles. But what I would say is we're also very open to people who are coming into this from outside of the textile and fashion space. And actually, in many of the applicants that we've seen to date, they are coming from other sectors or for other specialisms, but they want to apply their knowledge and their know-how to solve the issues within the textile and fashion space. And that is also very, very welcome. And actually, that brings great kind of richness and diversity to the cohort that we're bringing on. So don't let this dissuade you if you're coming from another sector, but you have an insatiable curiosity around textiles, fashion, and you feel like what you do know and what you've previously learned has applicability, then please do still consider applying. So in terms of the course content, the learning outcomes, I won't go into too much detail, but upon completion of the programme, learners will be able to demonstrate a mature and nuanced knowledge and understanding of circular design and related research, practice-based and professional skills. Apply, very importantly, this knowledge and skill to develop a body of original, ambitious, and intellectually informed work, which adds value to the system or to the stakeholders in the field and has the potential to be further developed at a doctoral level or in the world of work. So really that what you're doing, what you're developing has relevance and impact in the real world, that you can communicate, articulate, and defend with confidence and a professional attitude the purpose, design practice, and your research findings to multiple audiences through written, spoken, and visual output, and that you can demonstrate an ability to work in a self-directed manner, as well as effectively collaborate and co-create with teams and external clients and stakeholders around the development of circular design solutions in various contexts and for various audiences. So these are the very high level learning outcomes. But I do want to touch briefly on kind of the course and what it looks like in practice. How do these learning outcomes translate to your day-to-day experience? The course, when I was designing it, was really inspired, of course, by the pilot experience that we had and the success of that, but also by this model that you see in front of you. This is a model that was developed by the University of the Arts London and their Centre for Circular Design. And they basically suggest that there are kind of three main fields that we need to change in order to achieve a circular industry. The first is materials, the second is mindsets, and the third is models. And this framework has informed the design of the masters. So I'm going to briefly talk us through kind of the layout and structure of the masters. So as you know, it's 2 years. So if we look just at the year one modules, we've got three distinct trimesters. And the first trimester is really about motivation. So during this trimester, we'll be providing students with a holistic overview of why change is urgently needed, what are the wicked challenges currently facing the industry, and enabling you to investigate and critique the existing paradigms and explore alternative future scenarios. So this is really about understanding why we need to change and starting to imagine what change could look like. So a key part of this will be, of course, building up your knowledge on the fundamentals of circularity and sustainability, and also the history of those two theories, but also looking at speculative design and starting to imagine kind of potential futures and use that as a little bit of an exercise to break beyond the current paradigm and start to consider what the industry should be working towards. So that's the first trimester. The second trimester then focuses in on materials. So providing students with a broad and deep understanding of current and emergent thinking, innovation, trends and technologies related to circular materials and product design, and enabling them to explore, produce and present ambitious circular design projects and demonstrate a sophisticated and original translation of research into practice. So this is really about giving you an in-depth understanding of what we call circular design principles. And you'll be looking at how those are practically being applied by industry and what are kind of the things that are working and not working and why might that be. And you'll also be applying your learning to real life challenge or case. So you'll be matched with a design-driven enterprise in Ireland to help them to develop circular design projects. So there'll be a real life project integrated into that second trimester. And the third trimester then is moving into mindset. So this is perhaps a little bit of an unusual focus for a design master's, but I think it's really critically important because this is really about providing students on the course with the mindset and leadership skills needed to cross boundaries between sectors, specialisms, geographies, generations, backgrounds, and beliefs to affect change beyond their direct sphere of influence. So this is really kind of asking the question, what does it mean to be an agent of change, and how can you advocate and drive change within organizations or through collaborative networks. So you'll be looking at things like communication design, media design, climate psychology, etc. But you'll be also looking at various different leadership approaches and models of multi-stakeholder collaboration, and essentially kind of asking yourselves, where is my sphere of influence? What does it take to change hearts and minds? And putting that into practice as well, through, again, live research projects. Then the fourth trimester, which is when we come back together in autumn, is focused on models. So providing students with the knowledge and tools needed to design and implement innovative circular business models and services. So you can think of things like repair, resale, rental, etc. And this will be very much also building on the experience that NCAD has in the service design arena and working with the service design department and masters as well. And then the spring and summer trimesters, this is when you dive deep into your own research projects. So the major research project in spring is where you define, collect, and analyze a personally selected and justified area of research that you find particularly thrilling, and you will produce a kind of comprehensive and mature body of research work. And then the major design project is kind of the capstone or the final part of the program. And in that, again, you're working on a self-directed project that's really combining the theory that you've brought or that you've learned over the program together with your kind of chosen field of practice, combining those two things into a final body of outgoing graduation work. And you'll be guided and steered, of course, by the team to deliver both of those. So I'll hand over very briefly to Bernie to talk us through the entry requirements.
Hi, thanks, Gwen, for that good detail. Yeah, so the entry requirements it's a standard 2-2 undergrad. However, as Gwen said, the mix of applicants currently are quite interesting and quite dynamic. We were interviewing a cohort of them, was it last week or the week before? And they're coming from a very, very diverse background, but they all have that circularity passion, that sort of need to understand more and to be able to apply and make that change. So based on that, I wouldn't rule out your experience to date in terms of it being viable in terms of the application. So if you're unsure, the best thing to do is actually pop an application in, because all of your experience to date, the work that you've been involved with, maybe indirectly or directly as part of your profession currently, can actually impact or influence the learning and also the opportunity. So it's better that you have an academic review of where you're at currently, and then we can make you an offer based on that. The college ethos is to obviously encourage applications where the success rate is high. So that's why we would, always academic review applicants to see what they can bring to the table and what we can actually offer them as a learning environment. So I just think if you're interested and you think it's something you want to go ahead and discover, pop your application in and we can get back to you with feedback on that at any stage. So so a statement of interest is always good for us because it sort of frames where you're coming from. It gives us a little bit of insight into the dynamic of the group. It also gives us, some insight in terms of some of the content that we could tweak and also could sort of direct in your favor. So that's really important to have that statement of interest. CV is really important as well, and whether or not, again, it's outside the realm of textiles and fashion, that's fine, but do pop it in. Any transcripts that you've got available to you, please do pop those in. And they're the academic transcripts, so they're the grades that you would have got in your subjects within the university setting. Now, if it's been quite some time since you've studied, that sometimes can be hard to put your hands on. But I would include any sort of documentation that you have to hand, and we will be patient enough in terms of trying to encourage and support you to source your transcripts. But anything you have currently, you pop that in terms of the application form, and then request the transcripts from your previous university. And then the language, it will be through English. So in terms of your learning, it would be, obviously, if it's not your first language, we would need and require that you have a certain ability in terms of the understanding and learning through English. And again, that's in terms of making sure that you succeed in your degree, in your master's program of study. So look, when you apply, you have a huge opportunity to upload different types of documents, and there isn't a cut-off point on this. So if you think that you have information or project that you want to upload, please do that. It supports that application. So that's kind of fairly self-explanatory. Portfolio is fine. You don't need a portfolio per se. It is around the submission of the text and sort of your interest in the program, and then with your CV. But if you have images of work that you've done, we're happy to view those as well as part of the application process, but it's not essential in this particular instance. Yeah, so just anything that you think is of use in terms of case studies or previous experience that you might have, please do put that in the supporting documents. You can move on to the next one, I think. And as you said, I think Gwen's probably gone through career opportunities in some ways in terms of who this is aimed at. I think we're very much in a shifting, changing environment when it comes to particularly the fashion textile industry, but as a whole in terms of that circularity piece. And it's an area that's going to need addressing, and it's essential that it is addressed. We need graduates, and we need really creative thinkers in those fields. We don't necessarily need bureaucrats or any more of that. We do need it supported by the creative sector and the creative practitioners, and those are in the middle of that space that can actually impact and make change. So that's really where we're coming at in terms of launching this, and it's a really dynamic new space to be in. So the language that you're using, the way that you can persuade management, persuade other people to take this on board, all of that's going to be really important in terms of that communication strategy that you can go forward with once you exit the programme. And I know Gwen mentioned PhD opportunities, and that's something that there's a huge amount of space here for further research and a deeper dive. And if you're academically driven, it's a real opportunity to go there. And we actually need people in that space as well. So yeah, and you're in good hands in terms of the team. So I mean, Gwen obviously has huge expertise, but the connections that she also has in terms of the European connections of countries that are heavily involved in this area, that we're obviously trying to encourage that we get there as well, and we go on that same journey. But the connections are significant, and the learning that you will achieve on the programme will influence you going forward in terms of your career. Anything else?
Thanks. No, that's good, Bernie. Maybe we skip in light of time because we did start 10 minutes later. I do want to give a chance for questions. So I'm going to stop sharing and drop my screen so we can see the group. And we see a few introductions in the chat, which is fantastic.